nationwide leader in background checks and employment screening solutions. People G2 gives their clients access to the best human capital management and due diligence tools available. They are dedicated to helping their clients with all of their people-related decisions. To learn more, go to www.peopleg2.com. Talent Talk centers on the topics of talent recruitment and management, leadership development, company culture, and employee engagement. These are all timely topics for CEOs, entrepreneurs, HR professionals, and business leaders. We hope that as you tune in to listen each week, whether to the live broadcast or to the podcast on iTunes or iHeartRadio, that you hear something you can take away that will help you grow and impact your career in a positive way. And now, here's the host of the Talent Talk Radio Show, the founder and CEO of People G2, Chris Dyer.
Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning into Talent Talk. It is the first Talent Talk of 2022, and we are excited to be back, to be here, and of course, have two fantastic guests lined up for today's conversation about talent, about being talented. And really that's what this show is all about is, I love to learn from people, find uniquely talented people who are managing maybe staff in a particular way, or maybe they're just a really highly motivated and unique person that has something that we can learn from, that we can maybe get a little piece of wisdom. And so instead of me being the only person to go out to lunch with them or sit, kind of corner them at a conference, we really created this space to allow everyone who wants to tune in, to listen, even to ask questions. And so you can do that on Twitter by following @PeopleG2 or use the hashtag Talent Talk, or live on LinkedIn and YouTube right now, Facebook. If you follow me, you can certainly get the live feed right now and begin to ask questions, begin to start that conversation with us, and hopefully, let us know what you're thinking. Now, we've had so many great stories that have come out of the show. I've been really fortunate to be able to take those and turn those into some great stories that made their way into my first book, The Power of Company Culture, as well as my second book, Remote Work, that came out last year. If you're interested in either one of those topics, well, I'm sure you have Amazon or wherever you buy your books online, it's easy to find them. So Talent Talk is live every Tuesday, 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And we do push this out as a podcast. So a lot of you listen to us there on Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, iTunes, wherever that is. Go ahead and subscribe. But I also mentioned we do the LinkedIn and the YouTube now, and live on Twitter. So if you want to catch us there, don't forget to subscribe. That way you never miss an episode. Probably YouTube is the easiest one to subscribe to, or follow me on LinkedIn. But if you have questions, again, make sure you send them to @PeopleG2 on Twitter, and we're happy to try to, in live time, answer those questions and keep you into the conversation. My guests today include, all the way from London, Steve Butler. He's the Chief Executive at Punter, Southall, Aspire. And after the commercial break, we'll bring in Mike Procee. He's the CEO and co-founder of Cratic Ai. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. Probably not. I usually mess one name up somewhere along the lines. But let's go ahead and bring in Steve Butler. Again, he's the Chief Executive at Punter, Southall, Aspire. Steve is an experienced SME building business leader, chartered manager, academic researcher, business author. Sounds like he does a lot of cool things. So welcome to the show, Steve.
Hi, Chris. Good to speak to you.
Yeah, wonderful to have you here today. How are you? And what's important for us to know about you for our conversation today?
Well, firstly, I'm good. I had COVID over Christmas, so Today is my first day back at work post-COVID, but all's good. In London at the moment, government guidance is work from home, so the business has had to return to work after Christmas 100% at home, which is kind of not ideal. I'm very much a supporter of flexible working, but when we're restricted to one particular type, it's certainly not ideal.
Right. It's not flexible, no matter if you're being required to go to one place. It doesn't matter if that's in an office or in your home. That's not flexible, right?
Exactly that. Yeah.
So what's important for us to know about you and your background, as it revolves around talent?
Yeah, so I'm CEO of a business that I founded 6 years ago. I have 150 staff. and they're spread across the UK. An office in London with about 40 staff in, and the rest are spread across the UK, either working from home or from our regional offices. The business has grown through acquisition. So I've made 7 acquisitions over the last kind of 6 years. So culture's really important, because it's the thing that kind of holds the business together when you make an acquisition and bring a new set of people in. As you mentioned, I'm a business author. I've actually written 4 management books about my experience over the last 6 years, some of the challenges that I faced. I started off writing about managing intergenerational teams and some of the challenges I faced with different generations in the workplace. I then wrote about older workers and how we can manage to keep older workers in the workplace for longer, because we've got changing demographics. And most recently, I've published a book called Inclusive Culture, which is about the whole diversity inclusion journey, and certainly a journey that frightens a lot of small businesses. And I break it down with some real life stories of kind of different people in the workplace and things they've experienced, and some things that we've learned about how we've managed the business to drive a more inclusive culture.
Well, certainly last year we saw, really a spike, I think, in that conversation around diversity and inclusion. It was always something that was there, and I felt like if you went to a conference, there was a talk about it, and there was maybe a person that in bigger companies that was put in charge of it. But not until last year did I notice the conversation really saturated into every corner of the company, into every team. And there was the political conversation, there was the socioeconomic conversation, there was a cultural conversation for the company, cultural from a society standpoint. Really, the conversation kind of flowed, I think, in a very important way. Can you maybe explain how you see the diversity and inclusion conversation, and maybe why is that inclusive part so important to culture, from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the whole dialogue around diversity and inclusion has kind of been dominated by the larger companies. As you said, they can throw money at the problem, and they can have a board level head of diversity and inclusion. They can have network groups. They can spend a huge amount of money on kind of training and things to develop this within their businesses. But it's the small businesses where the challenges lie. And certainly in the UK, 90% plus of businesses are small to medium-sized businesses. So the challenge really exists in those companies. And if you're a small company, it's very difficult to create a very diverse set of people. You've got people perhaps in shared roles. You've got people with very a mixed set of expertise, and you're perhaps drawing from a different talent pool, because you can't hire at the rates that the larger companies are. So diversity inclusion for the smaller companies is a challenge, and kind of where do you start? And for me, it's all about creating the inclusive culture, because I've seen big companies go out and hire the most diverse set of people, and 6 months later they've kind of moved on because the culture's not right for them. So for me, it's about setting the tone for the culture first, make the culture right for your future hires, so that you attract that diverse set of people into the business and they want to stay. So it's all about hanging a sign outside the door that says, we're open and welcome anybody, and we've got the policies and the infrastructure to make it work for anyone. We're just not excluding people because of various criteria.
Right. So, I mean, what's the business case for companies? I mean, I know in my research and what we've been looking at, it's pretty similar for big companies and small. That if you get diverse opinions in there, if you can expand your organization by having different voices, having different opinions, that the more we see that, right, the better the company seems to do, the higher the profits and all of that. Is that sort of what you guys are seeing, or is there a different lens to that as well for the business case?
It's absolutely that simple. The more ways that you can look at a problem, the better chance you've got of solving it. So that the more ways you've got people looking at things with different experiences and different backgrounds, the better. So that is the business case. The more diverse you are, the more you can solve problems, and the better you can service your clients. And I think something that's often overlooked is that, especially in my industry, in the investment and savings industry, is every business should reflect their client base. Because if you want to understand your clients, you need a mix of people that reflect your client base. So you need to kind of set about making sure that's the case. And that's not been the case in the investment and savings industry. It's been very dominated by white middle class men for the whole of my career. And I think that's shaped some of the problems that we've had in the industry, and perhaps some of the financial issues that have been created in the past, because there's this groupthink, and we need to move away from that.
Yeah, and groupthink can happen even if we have diversity, right? I mean, I think leaders have to be very, very careful about groupthink and putting in solutions to ensure that we don't allow a group to go along. Because I've seen teams that are incredibly diverse, but if the leader is overbearing and they want everyone to go along with their answer, right? I mean, you could easily still have groupthink.
So hence the culture is important. Having everyone having a voice and having the opportunity to share and challenge, and to collectively feel comfortable for that kind of sharing and challenge is the only way that you're going to make that happen. So as you say, diverse team is possible, but if you haven't got the right culture within that team, you're not going to get the right outcome.
Right. Is there a point when diversity itself becomes, can we ever be too diverse? Right. And I can think of maybe one ridiculous scenario in my head, but I mean, aside from that, if you brought people from all around the world who none of them spoke a common language, you could have maybe they couldn't communicate and work together, right? Then it would be impossible. But why would we do that? So a step below that, is there a point when that becomes problematic, or is it just no, and we need to just do it as much as we can?
I think, and it's about the definition of diversity, and I think there's some, in the UK, there's some protected characteristics and the obvious ones that everyone thinks of kind of gender and race. But I think it goes much beyond that. It goes to neurodiversity. It goes to social background. It goes to kind of regionality of the country that you're in. In the UK, if you have regional offices, you're going to restrict your talent pool that you're recruiting from. Whereas if you have the flexibility for people to work from home, you open up the whole of the UK as your talent pool, and therefore you're more reflective of your clients.
And you really took me kind of where I wanted to go next, which was, diversity is about diversity of thought. For me, first and foremost, there of course there are those other categories. We can say diversity of gender, diversity of sexual preference, diversity of political opinion. I mean, we can pick any category, but it's really about thought, right? And keeping us from having the same types of people come in who are essentially going to make the same decisions and regurgitate the same ideas over and over and over again.
Exactly. And I think that diversity of thought is covered in lots of different ways. It's people from different regional universities. It's people that haven't been to university, so that you're kind of recruiting at kind of school level, and perhaps older worker level that are kind of mixing within the teams. It's also that neurodiverse talent. It's hiring people that are ADHD or some other type of neurodiversity, because they look at problems differently and they solve problems differently. And I think perhaps in the past we've excluded some people because it's been uncomfortable, or we haven't known how to react well with them. Whereas if we can create the culture where they can thrive as well, then that's going to benefit the whole team.
Yeah, and we've talked with other guests on this show. We've had this experience, and others have as well, where they've been able to hire people who maybe could not have lasted long-term in an office setting, and yet are fantastic employees, brought an incredible amount of value to the organization. But what they needed was flexible work or remote work in order to be able to do that. Whether it was getting to and from work, or it was being in that office setting consistently, that was not something they could tolerate because of who they are or whatever their particular needs or considerations might be. right?
Yeah, I interviewed a lady for the book who was ADHD, and her her skill was standing on stage and speaking. She said she felt at most at peace when she
Hmm.
was speaking to an audience of 500 people, which terrifies most people. So she made a fantastic business development person, and she was progressing really well within an investment firm in that kind of business development role. But the thing that she absolutely hated was turning up for a meeting and having to read investment reports and you know represent what she'd learned from the investment reports. It was the thing that she hated the most. So for it to work for her as a team, they had to kind of share the work and say, well, okay, well,
Hmm.
you're good at that piece. We'll give you the bullet point information you need to go and do the presentations, and we'll do the research stuff, and we won't expect you to do that research stuff, and then you get the best of everyone.
Yeah, and I totally understand that feeling. Being up on a stage of 500 or 5,000 people, I'm just happy as a camper. Talking to one or two people, small group, love it. You give me 12 to 15 people, and it is like torture for me because it's like there's too many people to make a connection, personal connection. It's not big enough that it's a stage and you're, giving a speech. And so trying to finagle all of the eye contact and the, feeling like you're being a good listener to 12 to 15 people, it drives me nuts. So I get that when people kind of have the different perspectives on how they want to, where do they feel most comfortable, right? Where do they feel like they do their best work? And that's often a question I don't think we ask enough of people. Where do they do their best work? Where do they get their best energy? And what drains them, right? And I think as leaders, trying to help them eliminate what drains them, if that's possible in that role.
Yeah, and this is why it becomes challenging, because what this requires is quality managers that will take the time to sit down and understand their team and structure a project according to the skill sets and strengths that they've got of their team, rather than perhaps a traditional way where they just said, right, this is the task we've got to do. You each do your element of the task, and we'll come back together and it'll all be fine. Managers of today have to be much higher skilled than they were in the past. That command and control style of management that existed in the 80s and 90s doesn't work anymore, and it's not appropriate for creating an inclusive culture.
I would say it hasn't worked since the Industrial Revolution, but I don't think anybody knew any better way to do it, or they weren't talking about it, right? I mean, there's actually some really good examples. 3M has been doing it well, kind of how we would expect today for a very, very long time. But they were just an absolute, nobody knew that, and they were the exception to the rule. I think everybody else was, well, how did my parents and how do my coaches and how do my teachers interact with me? That's how I'm going to manage my people. And that's all they knew. And then, and people put up with it. And I think there's at least now an understanding is a better way to do it. And people are not putting up with it, right? They'll leave their job if they're going to have a micromanagement type of a boss, or if they're going to be not allowed to sort of have some of that freedom to do their work in a way that makes sense for them, right?
Yeah, and I think it's very exaggerated for young people joining the workplace at the moment, because they've had a different education to the way that I have, and they've worked in a different way, so they don't understand that legacy way that I kind of grew up with, and they've had a very flexible environment for the way that they've studied and the way that they've collaborated at university, and they need that flexibility in the workplace, whether that's working in a coffee shop and the office and at home, whether it's kind of dressing informally. Asking them or putting constraints on them is pointless, because you won't get the most out of them. And I think this is a big cultural shift, because when I joined the workplace, my boss wore a suit, I wore a suit. We were all in the office 9 to 5, and that was kind of what we did, and nobody challenged it. But the status quo is broken now.
Well, and I will say that because I've worked with a lot of organizations, and I noticed some big differences, just in what's important from company to company. And so I usually say, listen, figure out what's important, what you think really needs to be in place, be really open and transparent about that to your people and those that you're hiring. But then anything else that doesn't fit in that thing, then if it doesn't matter, then why have a rule for it? Why put in any energy around it, right? Because I've been in companies where they want to wear, I mean, even today, they want people to dress up. And you know what? If you know that going in and that's important to that company and you're cool with that, then go be a part of that team, right? But if you're not, then okay, then you can choose not to work there. Whereas other organizations are super casual, everyone wears jeans and, oversized sweatshirts to work every day. And that's totally fine. That's not something they need to worry about. So I think it's just to your point about, does it matter, right? Is it something we need to deal with or not? And is it important?
I think as a CEO, though, that you want to open up the widest talent pool possible to you when you're recruiting. And as soon as you put restrictions on that talent pool, you're shrinking the talent pool down, and you're perhaps not going to get the best people that you could have got. So right. I think certainly for CEOs of my age, that means kind of reflecting and saying, well, are these things important to me? Are they shaping the business, or can we just let some of this stuff go?
So it's interesting you're saying, to look at how do we have the largest talent pool? And I guess I'm looking at it saying, how do you figure out what's really important to you and get a little bit nichey so that you can get the right people, that are going to be in there? I mean, I think we're both saying the same thing. We don't want to exclude people that we don't need to exclude by having unnecessary restrictions and rules. But I can't clearly see there are CEOs that really care about certain things that I'm like, I don't care. That's not how I would lead. But they really care about these three things. And so if they're just honest about it, right, and they bring in people who want to be supportive of that. I mean, I've seen very high stress, work really hard, environments, and I've seen other environments where it's very like kumbaya and it's everyone is supporting each other and yet they're both very successful, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, you have to open yourself up to what the possibilities could be. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I have a certain perspective on the world, and that may be right or that may be wrong, but I need to kind of look at it the multiple perspectives. So within the business today, I have a reverse mentor. It's a woman who's in her late 20s. She's kind of Polish. We meet every month and we talk about a whole range of things. And what that does is it gives me a very grassroots, different perspective on the business. Now, some of the stuff that we talk about, I just think, well, no, I just know by instinct that what I've done in the past is right. But other times I'm like, well, that's really interesting, and we never thought of doing it that way before. So why limit yourself to what you currently know? Right.
Well, this has been absolutely fascinating, and I hope that people will have an opportunity to go and look you up and check out your books. Maybe you could mention those, and also, what's the best way for people to find out more about you or to get a hold of you? What's the best way for everyone to do that?
So the books are on Amazon. Steve Butler. The most recent book is Inclusive Culture. I'm on LinkedIn. The business is called Punter Southall, so you'll find us at puntersouthall.com.
Fantastic. Well, Steve, thank you so much for being such a great guest today and bringing in so many fantastic insights. Hopefully we can have you back at some point and give us an update on, clearly you'll probably have written another 3 books by the time we get back to you again. So please keep up the great work, and really appreciate you being on the show today.
Great. It's been lovely to speak to you. Thank you.
All right, back after this quick commercial break, and we'll bring in my second guest, Mike Procee.
Imagine buying a newspaper and discovering that the news you're reading is 6 months old. There isn't much that stays the same for 6 months, and the same thing goes for background checks. In a time when so much outdated information is being passed around, it's good to know that People G2 offers something different. At People G2, we provide today's intelligence, not yesterday's news. Our value-added approach offers you a fully FCRA-compliant solution that includes up-to-the-minute information. By combining industry-leading technology with old-school human investigation, People G2 is able to give you information that is accurate right now, delivered quickly to our online system, or integrated with your HR system. So ask yourself, are you comfortable working with old news, or are you ready for a different kind of background check company? Visit peopleg2.com or call 800-630-2880. That's 800-630-2880 or peopleg2.com.
And now back to our show.
Welcome back to the Talent Talk Radio Show. In case you missed my first guest, you can catch Steve's interview on our podcast. We'll turn into it next week. But let's go ahead and get to my second guest. I'm excited to bring in Michael Procee. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. CEO and co-founder of, and another one, hope I'm saying correctly, Cratic Ai, where they're going to change the way people think about employee engagement. I'm excited to find out more about that. But don't forget to follow us at PeopleG2 and the hashtag Talent Talk and let us know what you think. But Mike, welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here.
So why don't you tell everyone what's the most important thing for us to know about you for our conversation today? What do people need to know about you and what you're passionate about?
For me personally, that's a tough one. Me in a nutshell. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cratic Ai. Throughout the pandemic, in the past 20 months, I got married, I bought a house, I got a dog, I baked some bread. So I think I did everything on the pandemic bingo list. So I also have a food blog and I love board games. And that's about everything there is to know about me in 15 seconds. Wow,
that's quite a bit. And you're focused on your company. I think we all did the COVID bingo thing, but it sounds like you've got a lot of interest in a food blog at that as a whole other separate thing. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of people out there excited to maybe find that one. But maybe can you explain to us what is Cratic Ai? What do you guys do? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So Cratic AI is a SaaS suite that builds culture in teams of any size. So we use AI-generated surveys combined with a weekly discussion between team members to measurably improve employee morale by a facilitated communication. So in a lot of the trials that we've done so far, 30 plus trials, with over 400 individuals, we've shown and sustained an improvement of 44 points in employee net promoter score relative to control teams. So that's a lot of fancy talk, but at the end of the day, it just means employees are talking more frequently and more positively about your organization than ever before. What's really exciting about this is that we have a referral rate of about 98% and a response rate of 97%. So people really do find the platform quite engaging, and I think that's a lot to do with our questions.
So it's great if you've got people engaged and they're in there. And then how does that then translate into, what is it leaders can get from that? What is it that leaders can really pull from your system and maybe potentially help with their people in a better way?
I think at the end of the day, something that, I personally struggle with, and maybe a few of your listeners might struggle with is, if we are pursuing a hybrid environment, a completely virtual environment, or even in the office environment, how do you maintain that culture? How do you get authentic communication happening? So often we can, get caught up in the hustle and bustle of daily lives that we don't stop to actually take the time to connect with our employees or with our teams. So it really helps people kind of create that space to connect. There's also a really cool component of it that helps remove a lot of our own biases. So I personally went through with one team, which was a small energy company, and it was very interesting. It started off just like every other team. We get everybody together. They're a little bit nervous. They start using the tool. And someone in the tool was far and beyond registering as quite engaged, quite motivated, like really engaging with the tool, really giving the other team members a lot to think about. And this individual is what I would say, probably with my own unconscious bias, I wouldn't have initially thought of them as a leader. I had bias kind of thinking that a leader is, maybe the loudest one in the room or the one generating the ideas or whatever that traditional leader looked like to me in my mind. But this person was actually a little bit more of an introvert. But based on everything we were seeing in the tool, they were unofficially leading the team. So of course, at the end of the day, they need to opt in to share any of that data. It's all the employees' own data, so we keep that separate. But they did say that they wanted to share that. They started working with their leader on a little bit of a performance plan, and I think it completely changed the trajectory of that person's career. And they might not have had that experience otherwise if we just kind of think about traditional meetings. So it really gave them a place to contribute and show what they were capable of.
Well, I really love that story because we have talked on this show many, many times about how do we better recognize our introverts in the company. I think to your point, we naturally assume that someone who's an extrovert, and I am a card-carrying extrovert, but that our extroverts are our leaders, and they're the ones who should take on these projects, and they're the ones that tend to open their mouths and raise their hand anyways, right? And yet there are sometimes a better choice. There's a better option, or there really is somebody else who's really running the group, and we just don't know it because they're not telling everyone what an awesome job they're doing. They're not sharing what they're doing. They're not out there, being their own hype man or hype woman like us extroverts are. And so there's things that we have to think about doing. I think that's why Slack has been so valuable for our organization, because you can see, right? It's so much easier for them to go and write it. You can see who's really doing things, as opposed to being in a meeting and who is the loudest person or who talked the most, right? Or acted like a leader. No one acts like a leader on Slack when you're typing it. You have to read it and you have to really think about it. So I think it's really fascinating that you guys were able to kind of see that. Are there other areas where maybe the AI helps people kind of better understand themselves?
I think definitely there's areas where it helps people better understand themselves. One of the most interesting stories that we went through actually with another team that was in a different industry, but fairly closely related. They went through actually, the first set of questions. Again, what we do is we work with IBM Watson. So it's no more rank out of 10, how are you feeling out of 5? It's all text-based response. So we ask questions like, what's the difference between manipulation and influence to kind of drive a really kind of insightful dialogue. So one individual in this tool was putting in her answers. She's been with the team for quite a bit, and it was registering lower on positivity, quite a bit lower. And so she actually, in one of the Cratic sessions, raised her hand and said, the tool's broken. It's saying that I'm not very positive here. You might want to go back and kind of fix that positivity ranking. So we kind of explored it a little bit. And we asked, well, would you be comfortable sharing some of your answers with the group? And she's like, yeah, absolutely. And she kind of read some of her answers out loud to the group. And then I asked to the group, like, how do you feel about this? Do you feel that this is positive responses? And one by one, the group kind of slowly said, yeah, you know what? I don't really read that as that positive a response. And you could see the moment of self-realization on that individual's face, where in person, they had a very green-yellow communication style, if you're familiar with Myers-Briggs, like very open and friendly and people-focused. But their email communication style and their typing style was very, very red, and it wasn't coming off as positive to the rest of the team. And I think it might have been the first time this person ever received this feedback in kind of a safe environment. And since then, she kind of started working on it. She started playing with her language a little bit more, expanding on it to kind of boost that positivity score. So we see people do things like that all the time in the tool. We're very careful to say that you never want a score that's too high or too low. Some of the best conversations I've ever been a part of have not been overly positive, but they've been growing conversations. But just by analyzing people's language and the language that people use within the team, you're able to generate a huge amount of self-awareness and self-insights. And I think that's what we really love helping teams and individuals do.
Well, it's so many people either don't know or they forget that when we write something, that people tend to take it negatively, right? There's an automatic bias to take the worst version of whatever it is you wrote. They don't have the smile, they don't have the body language, they don't have the hand gestures, they don't have anything else to use except what they're writing. And so that's why the emoji is so great, or the GIF, or whatever you can put into Slack or an email. You can put something in there to be like, yeah, Tom didn't send me that report again. And then you can put like a smiley face because you're like, but it's not that big a deal. Like, I just haven't gotten it yet, right? Instead of, he didn't send me that report again. And if you put nothing there, oh, they're pissed, right? There's something going on here, right?
Yeah.
So it makes a big, big difference. We were just talking with Steve about this. That gets back to having good leaders, right? Having good managers, people who can call that stuff out, who can talk about that, who can recognize those things and help train their team in a better way. How does your system, and maybe this is a part of the vision of what you guys are doing, how does it help maybe those leaders, those managers do a better job at helping their people?
I think one of the very interesting things about Cratic is a lot of my previous experience with employee engagement, it often came in the form of, the annual engagement survey where it comes, it's top down, everyone gets the same questions. then there's a little bit of a black box component afterwards where you don't know what happens with it, and then maybe something comes out of it afterwards. And that was a lot of my yes. And that was a lot of my experience. Why I think people have kind of taken to Cratic a little bit more is because it's very transparent and open. The team sees all the questions and answers right away, and they engage with it. And what we see is people actually start solving their own problems. So if we work with an organization and, for example, we run 10 teams through Cratic, they don't all get the same questions. Based on the team's response and how they're answering questions, the tool will actually take you in a different direction of the things that you want to talk about. So for one team, peer-to-peer feedback might be really important, while another team might be worried about leadership accountabilities or their corporate values or whatever it might be. So we create a very personalized experience for people to kind of go on that journey. And so one of our visions that were kind of really important is ensuring that a single team can see value in this, even if they don't do it with the rest of their organization. Any single team will see value in authentic and open conversations. Our vision overall for kind of the future of employee engagement is giving every CEO in every organization a live kind of culture dashboard of their employee engagement, where we currently have balance sheets and income statements, but Cratic delivers the final piece of that, which is an employee wellness statements of sorts. And that's kind of the direction that we're heading in right now.
Right. Yeah, and I think it could be really helpful for, I think, companies or teams to think about, what are new ways, like a system like yours, where, we can think about our people in a different way. We can find new ways to figure out who is a leader and who is thinking positively and maybe negatively, and but I really like this idea of kind of using the IBM Watson and using sort of a really smart AI to figure that out, because it hopefully can remove a lot of our biases and a lot of our there are so many like built-in bunches of crap in our head, our filters that life has put in front of us, that if we're not really aware of them, and we all try to get rid of as many as we can or be aware of as many as we can. But I've taken like those biasy tests and like you can find something. I mean, everyone has somewhere. And so how do we make sure that we're not being tripped up and potentially losing out on a great employee or not promoting the right person and all that good stuff, right? It's so important. And
absolutely. I'd build on that a little bit, Chris, if I could, and say not only for the individuals is it so important, but also as an organization, because using natural language processing, for the first time that I'm aware of, we're actually able to rank and report organizations against their values or help them develop their values if they don't have them. So if, for example, an organization says that curiosity, collaboration, and diversity are all part of their corporate values, you can measure that in the language that people use every day. Your listeners have probably already, in just the 10 minutes that we've been chatting, developed a little bit of a profile on me and who they think I am as an individual based on the language that I use. And you can do the same thing within an organization to actually see how you're performing against your corporate values. So it's just a very exciting kind of field to be in right now.
Yeah. Are there some sort of myths, or I guess culture myths, or things that you've discovered while implementing your AI into teams?
So we've done this now with about 40 plus teams, I think over 400 users and over 2,500 kind of culture huddles. The teams facilitate the huddles themselves, but there's some common themes that even challenged my assumptions, or I had thought were fairly accurate, that we learned were not. One thing that I had always believed in the past kind of graduating university was that it's all about employee happiness. If you have high employee happiness, you're going to have high employee engagement. We've really kind of shifted our perception on that a little bit. Now, what we kind of say is that employee happiness is an outcome of a good culture. Employee happiness is an outcome of good collaboration, high psychological safety. You can't just drive to increase employee happiness. You need to drive to increase the cultural traits in an organization. And then as a result, you see an increase in employee happiness. If you're just going for employee happiness, then throw a bunch of ping pong tables out there and you're fine. But it's about measuring the important things and actually changing those. So that was a big one that kind of stood out to me. Another one that I had thought about, but my views have since changed on, is that every culture is unique. And this is one that people generally push back on a little bit because everyone, every culture is unique to a certain extent. But the things that people want in their culture and that people are looking for in a good work environment aren't actually that unique based on what we're seeing. Like, people want authenticity. They want to be listened to. They want to be heard. They want to work in a respected work environment. And all of these things are fairly consistently found in every team. So that's where we see Cratic kind of guiding a lot of teams towards. The last few that we kind of see is one that we've often heard is it's hard to quantify the impact. We found it to be quite the opposite. There's probably too many things right now that you can measure, especially when you're looking at natural language processing and people's tones that they use. But it's about having the right metrics, not necessarily every metric. So we really focus on employee net promoter score, which is how likely are your employees to promote the organization to others. And that's something that we really drive towards. But we also look at things like creativity in language, friendliness in language, alignment, and we try to shift all of those in a direction that we think is beneficial to the company. And lastly, I'd just say that I used to think that having a good culture takes a lot of work, but I really don't believe that anymore. I think if you have a great culture, it kind of just takes care of itself and keeps moving forward. What I've kind of seen or experienced is that a bad culture takes a lot of work. It's very difficult to bring the best of yourself every day and to come in with positivity and keep contributing when a culture feels kind of the opposite of that. But if you have a great culture, it actually isn't that much work at all. You show up, you do your thing, you're in an environment where you feel respected, heard, and everything just kind of works quite naturally. Humans want to work in that environment.
Right. Well, so if someone were to turn on your Cratic Ai system tomorrow, is this something that they run, by their team, or is it run by you guys more as consultants?
So we're pretty adamant that it is run by the team and for the team. I think the last thing anybody wants is a group of consultants coming in and watching you and evaluating your culture. So it's very much a team run experience. We put the platform and the tool in the team's hands, and the managers and leaders can kind of take it forward from there. We do facilitate oftentimes the first Cratic session just to show people kind of, the behaviors, and we have some learning guides and everything that help people kind of walk through that experience. So they do see us host the first one, but one of the best parts about Cratic is immediately after, people put their own spin on it, and that's a really cool thing to see, because we can see, I've seen people host Cratic sessions much better than me, much more engaged than me, very, very open, and it gives me a lot of ideas on how to improve the way I host. So everyone can put their own spin on it. One of the really cool things we've seen with one fairly small company that was growing quite quickly is they found it was a great way to onboard their new employees. So when you first join an organization, you're struggling to find out how you provide value, how you fit in, where you can provide value. But because everyone can put their own flair to a Cratic session, we've seen some amazing individuals kind of just step up right away. It's their first week, they host a session, and it really gives them a chance to kind of show a little bit of their own personality. And that's been pretty cool to watch our customers go through.
Right. Well, the most important question is, before we go, how can people find out more about you? How can they, find out more about Cratic? What's the best way for them to reach out?
So our website, www.kratic.ai, is a great source of information. They can also reach out there and leave their email, or reach out to me directly, mike@kratic.ai, and I'll respond there, and we can kind of talk about any next steps, or I'll answer any questions that you may have.
And if anyone is, spelling challenged like I am, it is Cratic, and not with a K, it's with a C. So
yes, .ai, which sometimes still stumps me up. I try to go to .com or .ca, but .ai.
.ai. So Mike, thanks so much for being a part of the show today. Really enjoyed learning more about what you guys are doing. It sounds like a great service that companies should really be taking advantage of. So really be fascinated to see, how this evolves for you and the company, and what other great things, and even your food blog, maybe up to in the future.
Thanks so much, Chris. Have a great afternoon. Thanks again.
Thanks everyone for tuning into today's show. Hopefully you've gained something you can use in your own career in a positive way. Until next time, do what you love and show the world how talented you can be today.
You've been listening to Talent Talk Radio, brought to you by People G2.